Hello there, welcome to Unenlightened. I am Austin, the developer of Everbound, and I'm back with another update today. Just for starters, if you're interested in the Leviathan sculpt that you saw me working on a couple of weeks ago, that is a part of this project and something I'll be getting to a little more heavily in a later video. I have already made some improvements to that. I have some more sculpts on the way for other creatures in this game. But what we were working on over the last couple of weeks was something a little more nitty-gritty. We were focusing on the NPC navigation system for the game. The most common algorithm that people use for that is something called A*, and that is really great for its purposes. But I'm not a huge fan of that in terms of the way it makes characters look. I think it makes them feel like they're omniscient. A* by definition, A* calculates both from the source, like the NPC that is moving, and from the objective to find the most efficient path. And to me, people don't really naturally find the most efficient path. So I'm trying to develop something that's kind of focused around emulating sight and navigating based on what you can see. So that's been a bit of a challenge, but let's get into the basics of how this is getting started, where we're at, and where we're going. So the first part of this was pretty simple. All I really needed to do was have the NPC target the thing that it was supposed to be following and move in that direction. Moving forward, very easy. All you have to do, I put a little empty object at the bottom of the capsule that can detect the ground using what's called a sphere cast. And basically, if it knows it's on the ground, it applies a forward force to the capsule, and that emulates movement. And it knows to stop if there's no ground there. Originally, I had it actually stopping if it detected an edge, but I found that as I got into this obstacle avoidance code that I was trying to inject into this movement, it didn't really help to have it watching for edges. The two didn't play nicely with each other. I'm going to make something that's more in line with how we're avoiding obstacles in order to detect edges. So that's going to happen later. But for now, the main thing that was an issue with this was when I had it set to face whatever its target was, it was too fast. It looked too robotic. So what we have now is a lerp function, and that basically just smooths the transition from one direction to another, and we have that set with an adjustable speed so that the transition from the two varies depending on how far away the target is. That way, if our little NPC is really close to the objective, it'll turn quickly in order to keep up with any changes in movement, but if it's far away, it's not going to jitter with every little move that the objective makes, and things come out looking a lot smoother. The lerp method was a little bit new to me, but it's pretty straightforward, especially if you already know what a smooth damp function does. Basically, it takes a target and a current and sweeps between the two smoothly using a time value that you give it in order to keep track of how quickly it should move from one to the other. And just for the record, the type of variable that you use for a direction is called a quaternion. I'll use the word quats from here on out because quaternion is a nightmare to say. But basically, it's a four value vector, right? So rather than x, y, z, you have x, y, z, and w. And that's used to give a directionality and also magnitude. Oh, yeah. So you can have a three-dimensional vector and a magnitude. So when you're working in 3D space, all of your rotations are going to be quats. And if I got anything wrong there, by the way, let me know in the comments. I'm still learning also. I'm just trying to pass on what I'm learning as I'm developing this game. So now that I had my NPC targeting and following an objective, I needed it to be able to avoid obstacles that were in its path. Most pathfinding algorithms, like what I was talking about earlier with A*, do this by running a series of tests, spiraling out from the center to detect obstacles, and then they do the same from the target object, and basically through some math that I'm not going to pretend I fully understand, they essentially decide the most efficient path to that target objective. Now, I wanted it to look more like it was looking around and making decisions for itself. So what I did instead was I worked with what's called raycasting. And I have the NPC firing out a ray, which is just a line that is endless in one direction and then has a point at the other. In this case, the point is the center of our NPC, and we actually do have a point where it stops reading but just mathematically, technically, rays go on forever. We'll ignore that for this, though. Now, essentially what happens is when that ray hits what's detected as an obstacle, which is done by just putting them on the obstacle layer in Unity. So any and all objects that are going to be counted as obstacles will have to be placed on that layer. Objects can be on multiple layers, so that shouldn't conflict with anything else we have to do. So when that raycast that's coming out of the front of your NPC hits an object that's on that obstacle layer, it'll fire out 2 additional raycasts that actually start 45 degrees back and sweep all the way around. Those raycasts pull off that detection by basically saying every frame, okay, am I hitting an obstacle right now? And if the answer is no, then it takes a note of that. And that note carries around to the next frame. So every single frame, what it's really doing is saying, am I hitting an obstacle now? And was I hitting an obstacle on the last frame? And if the answer is yes, I'm hitting one now, and no, I wasn't hitting one on the last frame, that means it's found an edge. And when it finds that edge, the raycast can actually pass through the data of the exact point in space where it's hitting that object. And then I can use that information and pass it straight through to the targeting system that's being used to follow our little green block. So basically, for a moment, the NPC thinks its target is off to the side of the obstacle, defined by that edge, plus a little bit of just addition to move that point away from the edge to give it a little bit of breathing room. Now, there's actually a little bit of a problem with that right now. This is not completed. And as you know, with my projects, I like to show you things while I'm working on them. That also means they're not done, right? Those kind of go hand in hand. So there are some flaws with this script, but it's really starting to come together, and it's good enough that I'm definitely happy to show you where it's at. Right now, I have it making that adjustment based on the facing direction of the NPC, which I don't think I should be doing. I'm going to need to do it based on, I think, the target vector. Like, you know, because we have that information, the exact direction the line is facing when it detects the objective edge. We can use that information to say, okay, that's actually the direction we're using. Right now, if the NPC is facing a weird direction, it might go too far off to the left or too far off to the right. But long story short, this does get the job done. There's only really one more issue that I'm running into with this at the moment, and that's just that when it finishes navigating around an objective, which I measure by the same method that I use to check to see if it's close to the actual target. Basically, after it's within that radius of its temporary target that it's using to avoid the objective, it resets the system, makes its target values all back to 0, and then retargets the actual objective, continues moving on. What I have found is that when I do that, sometimes it tends to not target correctly the next time it hits an obstacle. So I think that's something wrong with my reset, but that might also be something wrong with the issue I mentioned a moment ago where the angle of the NPC is kind of negatively impacting my adjustments for obstacle avoidance. So I think if I fix those numbers, I'm going to have a better answer to that, which you'll see on stream, and definitely by the next video I'll mention it. One of the biggest issues I've noticed with that resetting problem is it seems to be that after it's already hit an obstacle once, its ability to correctly select which edge is the nearest edge goes out the window. And that's kind of a problem because it's called near edge detection. So it definitely should be detecting the near edge. But I know that this is just a minor quirk in the code that I need to figure out. I'll have it figured out by the next time you see me. The next video, by the way, is going to be an update on the Leviathan, and then a walkthrough of the next new nadir that is being sculpted, which is the only one in the game known as a dragon. Basically, it's like a traditional fire dragon because those are very near and dear to my heart, and I wanted to include them in the game. Although, as we get into lore, you might find that their circumstances are more than a little bit dire. But we'll talk about that in the next video. If you want to see more about how this project is being developed, if you want to ask me questions, please do so in the comments. But also, you can find me over on Twitch at unenlightened_live. You can ask me in person. I'll give you the best answers I can. We can talk about what art projects related to this I'm going to be working on. We can talk about lore to an extent. I don't want to tell you everything, but I do have a lot of lore for this world that I'm going to be peppering across this entire land. So I would love to talk to you about it. If you want to support this project and help me actually make it a reality, you can do so on Patreon. Melody, Jakob, and Hermit, y'all are my heroes. You help make this happen. And if that's not your bag, or if you can't afford it, that's totally cool. I'm not telling you have to do anything. And honestly, the most important thing you could do is share this video. Go find me on TikTok at UEAustin. Just share what I'm working on with other people so that folks know what I'm doing and get interested and get as excited as I am. And please do join the community over on Discord. That's where we talk about everything I'm working on and also stuff that's going on in the news and stuff that's happening with gaming and media and all kinds of fun stuff. So please do join the community. It's a great group and we'd love to have you in it. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. It's been a blast as always. I will see you next time with some updates on the Leviathan and a brand new dragon, baby. Bye-bye.